Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit about some of the stories in the news that have caught my eye this last week, and I also want to talk a bit about free ports and special economic zones. Now, before you click off and go and watch something else, they are quite important. Pretty dull, pretty boring, but they are quite important. And they're a little bit like Brexit. You know, there's virtually no conceivable upside, and yet there are no end of downsides and problems associated with them. So if you can hang on to the end, it'd be great. Now, as far as what's been happening in the news this week, well, I expect, like me, you're probably lying awake at night. I mean, I'm beside myself with excitement as to who is going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. I mean, it's just too exciting. It does appear to be that it's going to be between honest Bob Jenrick and Kemi the Rottweiler Badenoch. And I did see something in the papers last week about Jenrick. It appears that someone, a business or somebody, nobody knows quite what or who, but someone based in the British Virgin Islands, it's a British tax haven, gave him £75,000. It was from a company, actually, which it has no employees, it's never made a profit, and has £332,000 worth of debts. So quite what that's all about, I don't know. And whether or not that particular person will ever seek any favours from honest Bob for all this money, who knows? At the Labour conference, one sentence did stand out, and that was Rachel Reeves in her speech, and she said, exporters are tied up in red tape by a failed Brexit deal. This kind of ignores the fact that there's no such thing as a Brexit deal that wouldn't or didn't or couldn't fail, and any Brexit deal is going to fail because Brexit is a failure. So I don't know whether, I know they're going to make it all work, but at least she's acknowledged they do realise that exporters are having a hard time because of Brexit red tape. David Davis, our esteemed original Brexit negotiator, he's apparently going to be working for JCB, that's people make the diggers, and they're going to be paying £3,000 an hour, which seems an awful lot of money. But anyway, JCB, which is one of the owners or the founders, was Lord Bamford, who's worth £8.5 billion, but he's kind of disappeared, and I think he's sort of on the run because HMRC are after him for £500 million, and obviously he doesn't want to pay that because that would reduce his fortune to £8 billion, and I'm not sure he can manage on that. In other news, exporters of plants and flowers from mainland Europe, they're getting a bit fed up. I think there was a report about an Italian driver who spent 6 days in his cab and then had to be replaced by somebody else a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, they're all, according to The Guardian, they're turning their backs on supplying Britain because of painful new Brexit border checks, and they say they're putting trading relationships at breaking point. Well, this is something I go on about every week, about how the more difficult it is for European firms to come here, to send their lorries here, and the more complicated the paperwork, the less likely they're going to be to come. And I think this is just something which, as I say, I keep repeating, but it's going to be it's going to get worse and worse. It's not going to get any better. There's no way suddenly this is all going to smooth out. France and Germany are blaming Brexit, and they're blaming the UK's lack of safe routes for increasing people smuggling networks across the continent. Germany and France, who both already take in way more refugees than the UK does, say they are fed up being expected to police the UK's borders, and who can blame them, really? And I've always thought that the French, really, their attempts to stop people leaving, they're bound to be half-hearted. Why would they want to stop people leaving who don't want to be in France? So I want to say something about special economic zones and about free ports, because it's really quite an important subject, and although it's rather dull. Now, the idea is at the moment that there are to be 72 special economic zones and 12 free ports. And these special economic zones, they're quite big. They can be up to 45 miles in diameter. There's one, for example, in Plymouth, which is going to encompass the whole of Dartmoor. So sometimes it's going to be hundreds and hundreds of square miles. They will have special powers for compulsory purchasing land or buildings and so on. And they're going to be administered, mean, they will be within the law, but it's going to be slightly looser than companies operating outside of these zones. They will be administered by what are going to be known as development commissioners, and these are going to be committees of people who will be made up of local mayors and local businessmen and local solicitors and all the rest. The sort of guys that all meet down the golf club and will all know each other and so on, and who will have terrific powers. Now, the idea of these special economic zones is that businesses that operate within them, they get terrific favours regarding taxes. They pay a lot less tax, particularly property tax, than companies that operate outside. And also they won't, for example, pay any employers' national insurance, so it'll be much cheaper for them to employ people. And the idea is that businesses from all over the world flock into these zones and boost our economy. What in fact is much more likely to happen is that businesses outside of the zone are going to move into the zone to take advantage of the taxes and so on. In fact, it's very questionable, and lots of surveys have come to this conclusion, it's very questionable whether there will be any economic benefit at all. We had special economic zones in the past. In fact, I think Thatcher brought them in originally. Call me Dave Cameron got rid of them in 2012 because he reckoned they weren't working or they weren't worth continuing to renew their leases and so on, and that was the end of it. It was the political geniuses of Johnson, Truss, Kwarteng, and Sunak who suddenly decided to resuscitate them. I think they probably thought that Brexit wasn't working, and we have to somehow or other get lots and lots of firms from all over the world to come and set up low-cost factories and manufacture in the UK. And of course, nobody's interested, especially since Brexit, it's so difficult to deal with the EU from the UK. So there's very little interest in them. They're not really very successful. And I think in a way like Brexit, there are almost no advantages whatsoever in these special economic zones, and yet at the same time there are endless downsides, all sorts of downsides, and also like Brexit, it's going to be very, very, very expensive. Now, the reasons it's the problems with special economic zones is that in the first place, because they're being run by committees, there's going to be all sorts of cronyism. Favours are going to be given to firms that want to come in that happen to be mates of people who are running these things. You're going to get a lot of displacement of businesses who are outside the zones now are going to move into the zones to avoid tax. So the taxpayer will lose anyway as a result of that, and there'll be no gain to the economy. And they're quite expensive to set up. I mean, the government is talking about paying 160 million per zone to set them up. I mean, that by times 74 is an awful lot of money. And also, and again, reports have highlighted this from time to time. There was one, the Institute of Fiscal Studies came out with a very long report recently saying that the opportunity for corruption and crime is enormous. And so really it's a lot of wasted effort and time for absolutely nothing, and you would have thought that given where this has come from, as I say, Johnson, Sunak, and Truss and Kwarteng, considering where it's come from, you'd have thought the Labour Party, the first thing they would have said was, let's scrap all this nonsense. It's going to be no benefit to the economy. Let's just get rid of it. But no, they're right behind it. They're very happy with these zones, and they're happy that they're going ahead. Now, freeports are slightly different. They are special economic zones, but freeports are areas where goods can be imported without paying any VAT or duty until such time as they leave the area, the freeport. Normally, when goods are imported, you pay VAT and duty and so on, and in this case, you won't have to. And in all other respects, they're very similar to the special economic zones. Now, the most famous one is the one that is now well advanced, and that is Teesside. And this was set up by the mayor there, a guy called Ben Houchen, who was very popular with Boris Johnson, who made him a lord. And this involved 4,500 acres of land, which included an old steelworks in Teesside. And what happened was that Ben got a couple of his mates who are property developers, and after having spent £456 million of public money in cleaning the site up, he got his mates involved, and they're going to run it. Originally they started off on a 50-50 basis. Now Ben's mates have got 90%, and Ben is left for all the south. I can't remember what they called it, but anyway, the local authority has 10%. Now these guys, they were able to sell all the steel from the steelworks, which was thought to have raised somewhere between 50 and 100 million. They invested no money whatsoever. The site was cleaned up at a cost of £500 million, and they have a deal now whereby they can buy any land within that 4,500 acres for £1 an acre, and they can then rent it out, whatever they can get for it, and they obviously get 90% of the rent. So they have already, it's thought, made between 100 and 200 millions in less than 2 years without investing any money at all. It's PPE all over again. Now, freeports, more so than special economic zones, are renowned for the potential for crime, for smuggling, for money laundering, and all sorts of other crime, and drugs particularly. And so security is extremely, extremely important. Now, Private Eye have been following this story of they've exposed the whole story of the Teesside Freeport for going on for a very long time now, and I just wanted to read you some excerpts from the current edition of Private Eye, which came out only a couple of days ago, and they're talking about this security at the Teesside Freeport, and they say the contract for security has been given to an outfit called Any Security. It's a contract worth £5.4 million to guard the site, which forms the heart of the Freeport and contains its central customs zone. So this security company is going to be guarding everything, including the customs zone. And it says that Any Security is owned by a guy called David Garside, who's an ex-boxer who moved into the security business through local nightclubs and has himself been linked to gang-related violence in the area. When the contracts were awarded in 2021 and 2022, Garside's son, also called David, had not long emerged from an 11-year prison sentence for his leading part in a cannabis, cocaine and amphetamine network with links to organised crime groups in Europe, which involved bringing in drugs through UK ports. Before imprisonment on the drugs charge, Garside Jr. had also served time for his part in a machete attack in 2010. So there you have it. You have a Freeport where goods are brought in on trust and without paying duties or VAT, and you've got two guys who've made at least 100 million or maybe 200 million in a couple of years without investing any money or risking any money. One of them now lives in Dubai, and the security of that Freeport is down to some guy who's a renowned drug smuggler and was sentenced to 11 years for dealing in drugs. And I think that's an extreme example. In fact, it's the only example, but it's an extreme example of what can happen if you start turning over parts of your economy to these special economic zones and free ports. It's absolutely, utterly crazy and madness. And the fact that the Labour Party the Labour government is going ahead with it and is not putting a stop to the whole thing, it is really beyond belief. I mean, this is PPE all over again, only it's involving a lot of crime. But anyway, that's what I think about it. And if you've watched this far, thank you very much as always. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd be grateful if you do so. And until next time, thanks again and bye for now.